My friend and I, now 15 and 16, back then 10 and 11, experienced something I dubbed a ghost experience. I don't remember just how exactly it played out, but most of it. So back in the 5th or 6th grade, we were chilling at her house and were out in the garden in the dark as it was late autumn. My mom came to pick me up, so we had to walk back inside. Her garden is pretty big. There was an area with chickens, a little pond with fish, and a little area with just grass. We were back with the chickens, having our fun with them like always. Since my mom was now there, we had to walk by the grass area and the pond to get back. As we reached the water, we both saw something that looked like a woman in a dress right in front of us, maybe 2 to 3 meters away. Only for a split second though. I still remember how she looked. Tall, long brown hair, a violet top, and a green skirt. Although I can't remember her face. That's a blurry memory, I guess. Or she just didn't have any. I freaked a little bit at the sight, but not too much. I'm usually pretty unfazed by stuff like that, I guess. And I was tired anyway. We went inside and told my mother what I just saw. She didn't believe me. I don't blame her. But my friend agreed with me and even explained pretty much the same thing I saw. A woman with brown hair and a green skirt and a violet top. We're pretty convinced her house is haunted, by the way. It's like a huge house with an attic that has a barely used guest room in it and stuff. We went up there once because she told me some stories of the bed looking like someone slept or sat on it when there was no one who actually did. There's a huge collection of dolls up there as well. Scary. If you sit on the bed, you have a direct look at them. Another thing that happened to me was, I have a cat. She often sleeps on my bed with me, or sometimes on my legs and stomach. One time, she fell asleep on me, and I fell asleep as well. I woke up around 3:40 a.m. to my cat staring at the room behind me. So, some explaining for that. I sleep facing my wall. Like my feet are at my wall. Behind me is a little space with my bookshelf, dresser, and stuff for my cat. On the right side next to the door is an opening in the wall leading to another room with my PC and stuff. There's a couch as well. So I wake up to my cat just staring at or through this opening for about a minute or two. She didn't respond at all. When I petted her, usually she looks at me and purrs. Nothing. She just stared. It was pretty scary, not going to lie. So yeah, guess those were my experience.
I'm a 16-year-old male, and I used to be a bit skeptical to all things paranormal until one weekend at an abandoned house. To give you some backstory, I was with my 2 best friends at the time, Danielle and Julia. We were home alone and bored at Danielle's house, with nothing to do. I can't remember whose idea it was, but one of us had the idea to drive around on some of the old dirt roads and check out abandoned buildings. There were a lot of abandoned places, and where I live is pretty far out in the country, surrounded by either farms or woods. So we went to the first 2 old tobacco houses, took a few pictures, and just sort of goofed off. We got back on the road and saw an unkept driveway. Keep in mind, hardly anyone lives on this road. We decided to drive down the driveway, despite Julia saying that we shouldn't because it didn't feel right to her. Not the fact that it would be trespassing, but that she was getting extremely bad vibes about this place. However, Danielle and I insisted. We drove down it, and it was pretty far back in the woods. This is where weird things started to happen. We parked the truck in a little clearing and noticed an abandoned house in the distance. However, before we got out of the truck, the front sensor went off, beeping like crazy. So did the back one. It was as if something was walking around the truck. The weird thing is, we were parked in the clearing, so there was nothing that could make the sensors go off. Even if there were, it would have gone off before we even parked the truck, and wouldn't have just randomly gone off in that order. Danielle and Julia were kind of freaked out, but I just ignored it. It wasn't until later that this would freak me out too. We all got out of the truck and started walking towards the house. I was in front with my friends walking a decent distance behind me. If I'm honest, I was showing off and acting fearless. I wasn't that scared until I saw her, a woman. A woman with dingy, unkempt looking hair and a colonial style dress looking around the corner of the house. She looked at me, just kept her finger up to her lips, and hushed me very loudly. The feeling I had is almost indescribable. Imagine feeling all senses of safety and protection is gone, and you don't feel at all happy. My heart felt like it stopped. I started crying. I was so scared. I knew she wasn't human. I don't know how, I just knew. I turned around to my friends and screamed, "Run!" and started sprinting back to the truck. My phone flew out of my pocket about halfway back to the truck. My friend Julia told me that this had happened, and I told her just leave it. Now if you know me, you know that if I'm ditching my phone, I'm serious. Julia and Danielle got back to the truck. We tried to open it, but it was locked. Danielle reached for the keys, but they were gone, and so was Julia's phone. It was as if whatever this thing was trying to keep us there. Danielle ran back to pick up Julia's and my phone and found our keys. We got in the truck and floored it out of there, back to Danielle's house. You might think that it's just coincidental that we dropped our things, but the thing is, our phones and Danielle's keys were deep in our pockets, and it didn't make much sense for them to fall out on their own like that. Later at the house, we were all talking about the entire situation, and I was explaining what I had seen. My friends didn't even hear the shush, nor did they see the woman. I was so afraid that they didn't believe me, but Julia reassured me that the look on my face and tears were proof enough to her to run as well. We later found out that there had been a few sightings of a ghost on that road by workers at the Fort Pickett, a military facility nearby.
So the first encounter with this spirit, I think that's what it is, was about 2 to 3 years ago. I can't really tell because I tried to forget it at the time, thinking it was just a trick of the light. I was woken up around 1 a.m. in the morning by a creaking noise at the end of my bed, and I looked to see a silhouette of a head with 2 glowing circles for eyes. As my eyes focused, it disappeared. I sleep on a very high bed, and this thing had to be really tall to poke its head over the end, or it was standing on one of the bars. I tried to forget that this ever happened at the time. However, that all went out the window when I saw it again a few weeks later. I was asleep, and like last time, I was woken up by a creaking noise, and I saw it again, but in more detail. It had a gaunt man's face with what looked like a leathery brown skin in the orange light of my new clock. It also had drooping, tired-looking eyes with 2 glowing pupils. I couldn't see the rest of the eyeball, just the pupils. I only saw it for 4 to 5 seconds max each time, so I don't really remember all the details. But if you want to know anything about this, please tell me, because I can hardly sleep, and I'm so scared of going into my room.
Back in 2011, I was having a really bad time health-wise for the year before that year and the one after. My lungs filled up with fluid as soon as the cold weather hit, and I was in the hospital for at least 10 days at a time. 2011 was the worst. For reasons yet unknown to me, the specialist in charge of my care incorrectly diagnosed me with tuberculosis and gave me drugs that would either kill or cure me. It nearly killed me. It reacted poorly with my diabetes, and my lung specialist was a douchebag who didn't care that I was throwing up for 3 straight days. I almost died from ketoacidosis, and I was in the ICU for 3 days, in the hospital for 13. I also had a gnarly near-death experience, but that's for another story. While I was in the ICU, passing in and out of consciousness, and completely unaware of the passage of time, I hallucinated a cat. I'd be on the edge of sleep, and something would jump on the bed with me, chirp, and curl up so I could feel the warmth and purring. Sometimes he would knead my leg through the sheets, waking me up. I saw him come in the room only once. He was a big black, long-haired tomcat with an aggressively cheerful disposition and huge yellow eyes, such that I nicknamed him Lambert in my head. I even asked the nurses about him. Half out of my skin I was, and that's when I realized that he wasn't a real animal. I made a promise in my head all the same. He had kept me going by letting me think there was one creature there with me 24/7, keeping me tethered to life. So if we meet again, I would return the favor and look after him however I could. Fast forward 8 years to 2019. My childhood cat, Lupin, had finally succumbed to old age. She was born in 2000, and to try to deal with the grief, I was Facebook scrolling through local cat sanctuaries and rescues, and who should I see but a kitten who was the same exact match to the hallucination, spirit, dream, or whatever that kept me wanting to stay alive back then. I was sure in that moment that I saw him, and I was even more sure when I went to meet him at the shelter. I saw the same white freckles on his shoulders that had less than inches away from my face as I drifted, and he purred in the hospital bed. Mom vetoed the name Lambert, so we called him Jet. He has chronic anxiety issues and no food security from being on the street for the first 3 months of his life, and he kept me on my goddamn toes while I was getting over the death of my friend. But he's got the softest fur ever, and is a chronic cuddler, and I owe him a lot. He still chirps when he jumps onto my bed. I'm not exactly a gold star believer. My philosophy is weird shit happens, but I'm inclined to look at the logical explanations first. I know I was super sick, and my brain was throwing up all kinds of nonsense. I know that 8 years is a long time for memory to change, especially of such blurry and confused period. But emotionally, I can't shake the feeling that I met this cat nearly a decade before he was even born. I ghost hunt at the Mansfield Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio, a lot. In fall of 2019, I had discovered someone lingering in the east showers. No one had known about him, so I kept him a secret for a bit. We got really close, and I learned some things about him, and he visited me at my home, which isn't a problem for me. Mind you, I used my pendulum to speak to him. Months later, on another hunt, we discovered that he was being abused and was very badly hurt. He was hiding in a corner, scared for his life, so my father helped him out and escorted him to the hospital to get checked out. We went up a couple hours later, and he felt safe there, so we encouraged him to stay. After this happened, that's when I started to tell people of his existence and inform them of what had happened to him. When I first met him, I found out that he didn't know that he was dead. I felt like it wasn't my place to tell, and if it ever did become my place to tell, I knew that it was too soon. June 2020 rolls around. I invite some of my friends along with me to help my dad speak to him, because I knew that there was something that had to be talked about. Up in the hospital, another spirit had been harassing him and telling him what to do, and he couldn't escape it. My dad was helping him understand that he doesn't have to listen to this guy, especially because he has no superiority over him. He's basically just a guy who was trolling him. My dad started to slowly ease into it, asking him how it's possible that he hasn't eaten in a while, explaining to him that he's able to go through walls and leave rooms whenever he wants, telling him that he can leave whenever this troll is harassing him. My anxiety and intuition started to rise, but the anxiety wasn't my own. I knew that straight away. Something was telling me that he was nervous about what my dad was saying to him. I ended up taking over and explaining how we're all dressed differently, how we were all wearing masks because of the pandemic, because it's 2020, not the 1890s. I said, "Do you know where I'm getting at?" And my pendulum responded with yes. And right after that, I could feel tears coming. I said, "I can't do it." I couldn't tell him he was dead, but he already knew. I started crying really hard and felt a huge pang in my chest. The kind you feel when you have just been told a loved one has died. And I knew I wasn't crying, it was him crying. I've never felt another's emotions before, and the pain I felt, I knew was his, and so did everyone else that witnessed it. A friend who took an audio recording of the session told me that she heard a male's voice say, "Dead?" After I asked him where I was getting at, and when she played it for me, I heard it too, and we knew it was him. I cried for a good couple of minutes and was telling my dad how heartbroken he was to hear that. It was very hard for the both of us, but eventually, he grew to accept it. Ever since then, I've been sensitive and sometimes feel the emotions of the spirits I speak to. Sometimes it's strong, sometimes it's not there. It was one hell of an experience, but I love him to death, and I hope I never lose him. That's how close we have become. I was told we have a special connection, and I don't doubt because I feel it. Anyways, thanks for listening to my experience. I've been wanting to share it somewhere.
First time posting, so I apologize if things are unclear or weird. My family has collectively had many experiences with the paranormal. Mostly starts with my mom at age 5 when she saw a shadow man in a 20s style suit and fedora walk into her church during a service. She asked her youth pastor who that man was, and her teacher responded there was no one there. The shadow stayed for 15 minutes and got agitated when the pastor began to pray. My mom, who is now 51, will occasionally still see this fedora man. 2 incidents was when I was 14 or 15, each a separate night. One night I was in bed and I felt someone use both hands, open palmed, to smack my feet hard under my blanket. It made me shoot up in bed thinking my brother was messing with me. Everyone is asleep in the house. Another time, the same location, was I saw a tail, a lanky, misshapen shadow figure at my door swaying. My room was so dark I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, but this shadow was darker than the room. Last most memorable incident was when I was a senior in high school. We was watching a jazz documentary on percussion class. There were a total of 7 students, plus our band teacher in a large band room, spread out watching in the dark. I was the only one in a chair due to a broken foot, and I was elevating beside my teacher, who was on the other side of the room. 4 classmates were with him, while 2 others were sitting on each side of me on the floor. My first thought was to look for someone, but everyone was in their spots and the 2 boys beside me never moved. I was able to see them constantly with my peripherals. The chimes had been standing up straight and was not caught or anything since I had checked them earlier. They were moved, still swaying when we all looked back.
I'm a female, and at the time of this story I was 16. It was summer, so school was already out. My parents were hardly ever home, since work kept them away. My little sister was staying out with my grandma. I had decided that night that I didn't want to be alone, so I called a couple of friends to come over. While I was waiting for them to get there, I had gone up to my room. As I walked in, I got a really bad feeling in the pit of my stomach, and it felt as if I was being watched. Now, mind you, I was completely alone in the house upstairs on the 2nd floor. I brushed it off, thinking it was just my imagination. I walked into my own bathroom to find all my hair products and jewelry on the floor, and the window was wide open. That was when I started to panic. My first thought was that we had an intruder, and I ran to get my dad's rifle in the closet. I kept it by me while I hid in the living room behind our couch. After about an hour passed, I started telling myself that I had just forgot to close my window and the wind knocked over my stuff on my counter. There was a knock on my door, and a wave of relief rushed over me. I ran to the door and opened it, only to find no one there. I slammed the door shut and started panicking again. Were some jerks messing with me, or was it something else? I didn't want to find out. At the time I was thinking, where the hell were my friends? Just when I took my phone, I heard a faint laugh come from inside my room. I sat and listened for a moment. It sounded like a little girl's laughter. Of course, that just freaked me the fuck out more. In the movies I watched, that usually means get out of there, and fast. But the laughing abruptly stopped. I was so scared I didn't know what to do. Just when I thought it was over, a huge bang came from the kitchen. All the pans had fallen off of the pot hanger. I was so scared, I couldn't move. Then I heard the little girl's voice again, though this time it was right behind me. And she whispered, "Help me." I turned so fast that I could have probably broke my neck. And surely, there was a girl in a blood-soaked white dress. I can't tell you how fast I booked it out of there, never looking back. I stayed outside until my friends got there. I ended up going to my friend's house. I never went back into the house again. This happened just yesterday, so it's fresh in my mind. I'm not quite sure what to think of it, because it was just so bizarre and unbelievable. I might have just been sleep deprived. So last night, maybe at 11 p.m., I was walking around my block. My town is relatively safe, so I didn't feel in danger. Plus it was a pretty night. I had been walking around for 5 minutes when a pale woman with blonde hair caught my eye from across the street. She was about my height and looked around my age too. I didn't actually pay attention to her after I first noticed her. I circled the block again, and she was on the same street, a couple feet in front of me. She was standing on the curb, staring at cars passing by. It was a main road, so even that late, people were still driving on it. I said hello to her, and she turned and gazed at me. I couldn't see her face super well, but from what I think I saw, she had no pupils or color in her eyes. She just stared at me. After a while, I asked her if she was okay. She didn't respond again and simply pointed to the road. I was really confused and didn't understand. Right as a red car started coming down the road, she stepped into the road. The car slammed into her, and it was a bloody mess. The driver immediately stopped and jumped out. It was a man in his mid-20s. We both spoke about it, freaking out. He called the police, and I went around the car to see the state of the girl. Once I circled around the car, she was gone. Not gone as in dead. Gone as in she wasn't there. The blood on the road was gone too, but not gone from his car. After the police arrived, they concluded that it was a big hoax from a kid who doesn't know what they are talking about, and some guy who went along with it. A sample of the blood of the car was taken and found out to be paint. I'm still not sure what happened. I'm still not sure if what happened was real. It felt so real, but I don't believe in the paranormal. I don't know what it was, if it was a dream or if it was real, but I remember it like it was real. I feel like I can't leave the house now. I don't understand anything now, and I feel like I'm going crazy. Has anyone ever experienced something like this?
Short backstory. 4 years ago, shortly after my mom died, I started playing with the spirit board, not believing it was real. Something got attached to me. One day, I was sitting in my room with my friends while they played the board themselves. They told me it was spelling out my name. Sure enough, it was. I walk over and ask it what it wants, and it starts spelling out Mom, fast and repeatedly. I've never used one again. I was being followed by something for about 2 months after that. About 2 weeks ago, my friend bought some dowsing rods. I brought him over to my place, and we started asking questions and got responses right away. This thing seemed like a benevolent entity, so we indulged it and kept playing occasionally, questioning it and trying to figure out what it is. I have a 2-year-old sister that has nightmares and wakes up practically every night and has to be rocked to sleep in a recliner in the living room. Yesterday, I was tossing and turning all night and could barely sleep. I woke up around 6 a.m. to the very same recliner rocking while everyone was asleep. I brought my friend back over and questioned to try it, and figure out what it was. I asked if this was the same thing that followed me 4 years ago. It said yes. I asked if this thing was potentially my mom, and it said yes. But I knew it definitely wasn't. I just wanted to see if it was lying or not. I called bullshit to it, and I asked if this thing is what was rocking the recliner, if it was evil, and if it was what I encountered 4 years ago. It said yes to everything. I could have lied, but I don't know. My friend was calling it names and asking it to show itself, make something move, etc. Nothing happened. Later that night, when I came home, around midnight, I tried to go to sleep. I've never been so terrified in my life. I kept hearing shit happen every 15 seconds, it felt like. It was loud. It was bad, loud, and very disturbing. I heard loud footsteps that seemed to be going around me. I heard my TV creak. I heard my fan physically move. I heard something in my kitchen move. And I swear I could feel when this thing was right next to me. Around 2 a.m., I wake up to my little sister screaming and crying. The worst it's ever been. I don't know what to do. Please someone help me. I've tried to convince my dad, but he flat out denies anything is going on. And just simply doesn't believe.